So because of those conditions that say that there are many buyers and sellers and that they are selling identical products, it tells us that firms in perfectly competitive markets are price takers, meaning that they have to take the market price as given. And the reason for this is that they are too small on their own to actually influence the market price. Again, perfectly competitive markets are relatively rare, but the reason that we care about them is because they provide a foundation for us to compare everything else to. So we care because it's still an important benchmark or an important threshold to compare everything else to. So we have a multiple choice question, and it says for a market to be perfectly competitive, there must be, so we know that there must be 1, many buyers and sellers. 2, they must be selling identical products, meaning that there is no way to distinguish between what comes from one firm and what comes from the other. And 3, there must be no barriers to entry. So we know it's not A because it's telling us that there are low barriers to new firms. And it's telling us that firms are selling similar products. We know it's not B because there's not a small number of firms that compete. C seems to be good. For D, we know that it's not D because there's not substantial barriers to new firms entering the market. And for E, we know it's not E because there's more than one seller. And it's not a product that has no close substitutes. So our only answer choice is C because it lists all 3 of the requirements necessary for a firm to be considered perfectly competitive. So if we were to look at a perfectly competitive demand curve, a perfectly competitive firm's demand curve, it would be horizontal. And this horizontal demand curve is telling us that they can sell as much as they want at the market price. So a perfectly competitive firm can sell as much as they can produce or want to sell as long as they sell at the market price. If they try to sell above the market price, so if they were to try, say, $8, they would sell nothing. However, if they were to try to sell at, say, $6, they would still sell, but they'd be giving up money. And if we remember our assumption is that firms want to maximize profit. So if they're selling at $6, they're giving up $1 for every single unit that they're selling. And if they're doing that, they're not maximizing profit. Now, I know that you are probably thinking that in order for this to work, we have to completely ignore everything that we were talking about when we did our original supply and demand. And that's not true. It actually is very connected. When we did supply and demand, we looked at the entire market. So let's say this is the market for apples. And we'll say that this is the Ashley's Apple Farm. So our supply and demand curves from previous chapters, previous knowledge that we've already done, say that it should look something like this, where this is our price of apples and this is our quantity of apples. And we know that supply is upward sloping and demand is downward sloping. And where they intersect is our market equilibrium. So this will be our Q star, and this will be our P star. For the individual firm, this price is now taken as given. And this, is now the demand curve for this individual farm. So if we were to make this, say, $4, then I can sell, or this Ashley can sell, as many pounds of apples as desired at a price of $4 a pound. So if I sell, say, 15 pounds of apples, each pound would sell for $4. If I sell 30 pounds of apples, each pound would sell for $4. And if I sell 45 pounds, each pound would sell for $4. Meaning that every single pound is selling for the same amount of money. And what's important from this is that it's telling you that the marginal revenue is the same for every single pound of apples being sold. So the marginal revenue of each pound is the price. And what will be coming is we will be looking at total revenue And total revenue is price times quantity sold. While marginal revenue, if you think back all the way to the beginning, is the change in revenue from selling one more. And I'm going to just leave a blank because it doesn't necessarily have to be pounds. It could be apples, pounds of apples, or tons of apples, or bushels of apples, or whatever you feel like selling. But your marginal revenue is the change in revenue from selling one more of whatever we're measuring our quantity in.